As expected, Alex Pereira has just beaten Khalil rountree, so it's that time once again to go through Pereira's potential opponents and rank them based on their chances at beating him. We're going to go lightest to heaviest, and we're going to start straight away with our middleweight champion Dricus du Plessis. Now, if this fight was at 185, Dricus would be in the 50-50 tier, but any middleweights on this list I'm going to imagine as if they're fighting at 205. And if the fight's at 205, I give Dricus a low chance at winning. My reasoning for this is because I think Pereira's durability and strength is different at 205 than it is at 185. To the point where it makes all the difference in a matchup against a guy like Dricus du Plessis, because Dricus' main path to victory is going to be his wrestling. Maybe if Pereira's weight trained, one big punch from Dricus could change things, but at 205, Dricus does not have that one punch factor that he does at 185, so his only path to victory would be the wrestling. And since Pereira seems much more capable of defending takedowns at 205 with his increased strength, so it's a hard task for du Plessis, especially considering how open he is on the feet sometimes, which can lead to a perfect counterpunch for Pereira, which is why I've put him in the low chance tier. Our next opponent on the list is going to be Khamzat Chimaev. Now, this is assuming that Chimaev beats Robert Whittaker later this month, and if he does, I really do think he's got a good chance at beating Alex Pereira. I know a lot of people don't rate Chimaev as high as they used to, but if you just look at his wrestling, he is one of the best wrestlers in our sport at the moment right now, regardless of what you think of him. The speed of which Chimaev gets his takedowns is scary to watch sometimes, and he's also got a submission threat and he causes damage while he's on the ground. The way he ragdolled Usman in the first round of their fight is something that I can't imagine any other fighter in the roster doing. But obviously he did slow down in the fight, Usman started stuffing his takedowns, and arguably he could have lost that fight. In terms of Alex Pereira though, Chimaev is quite a nightmare matchup just because he's a pure wrestler. And Pereira, we still haven't seen him versus an actual grappler yet in the UFC. But the question is, can Pereira land anything on the feet before getting taken down? And can Chimaev get the finish on the ground before he starts to slow down? You do have to lean Pereira just because Chimaev will be the smaller man for once in one of his fights. And I don't think Chimaev will be nearly as effective as he usually is, because he's used to being the bigger man in his fights. Our next opponent is going to be the trilogy fight against Israel Adesanya. Now, since Adesanya just lost to du Plessis, the chances of the trilogy fight happening are very, very low. But he is still the only fighter in the UFC to have a win over Alex Pereira. Their fights in the UFC were great to watch, especially the first one, where both fighters had their moments, with Adesanya being up on the scorecards 3-1. Going into the final round, where Pereira had reduced Adesanya's mobility enough by damaging his leg, which set up the left hook, which in turn set up the finish, which obviously led to the rematch, where it actually looked like it was going to go the same way, with Adesanya's leg being damaged, until Pereira got too overconfident trying to find the finish and got himself knocked out. The reason why Adesanya is in low chance, even though he's got a win over Pereira, is mainly because of the career trajectories of the two. Adesanya does look slower, and Pereira looks better than ever at 205 now that he's a bit stronger and his chin's better. I also believe that Pereira could have won that second fight if he didn't just stand right in front of Adesanya with his hands completely down, basically asking to get knocked out, which is why Adesanya is in low chance. We move on to someone who Pereira probably should have fought instead of Rountree, and that's Ankalaev. I'm going to put him in decent chance mainly because I don't think he's actually that good, either on the feet or on the ground, as people seem to think he is. We did see Jan Blachowicz destroy Ankalaev's legs with leg kicks, which is something that Alex Pereira would absolutely use against Ankalaev if they were to fight. The leg kicks being so damaging that Ankalaev had to resort to only wrestling in the last 2 rounds of the fight. I also get the feeling that he's got a terrible chin because the shot that Thiago Santos landed on him wasn't really powerful at all, but it still managed to drop him. So while Ankalaev has some of the tools to beat Pereira, I don't think he can use them well enough to beat him. He's also the ugliest fighter on the tier list, which puts him down a bit further. Our next fighter is actually going to be the person who's signed to fight Ankalaev next, and that is Alexander Rakic. I actually think Rakic is going to beat Ankalaev. I think he's very, very underrated. He's got arguably the best leg kicks in the sport. He's very well-rounded. He's just a very, very clean, technical fighter in general. Not only does he have great kicks, he's also got good boxing as well, as we saw against Jiří Procházka. In the first round against Procházka, I was thinking maybe this guy could beat Pereira, he could be a future champion. But then obviously Procházka ate everything Rakic threw at him through sheer autism, and then Rakic couldn't take the pressure anymore and melted, and then got stopped in round 2. To me, he could have actually won that Procházka fight if he just mixed up the takedowns to avoid the danger on the feet, and that's exactly how he could potentially beat Pereira, as long as he mixes up the wrestling. Moving on, I think everyone's been dying to see where I'm going to place this next fighter. And our next fighter is going to be Kayla Harrison. There is a case you can make for Kayla Harrison winning the fight, but honestly, I feel like Pereira's just a bit too tall. Like he's slightly taller than Kayla Harrison, so I think you have to lean Pereira in that fight. We move on up to the heavyweight division, where we're going to talk about Ciryl Gane. Ciryl Gane's gone in the low chance tier. This fight's a bit more interesting compared to the other top heavyweights, just because we're actually going to see Pereira striking in that division. To be honest, I feel like Ciryl Gane's striking's a bit overrated, just because we only really see him against short of fat heavyweights like Tai Tuivasa and Derek Lewis. And he did get dropped by Tai Tuivasa, who's many levels below compared to Alex Pereira. And when he did fight someone who's quite technical and matches his size on the feet like Alexander Volkov, it was quite a competitive, close fight. And while Gane's speed for a guy that size might seem very impressive, he doesn't really have any finishing ability on the feet. So he can look as technical as he wants for the first few rounds of the fight, but if Pereira lands one left hook, it could be over. So he's going to go on low chance. Our next opponent is all the way at the top in the will win tier, and that is Mr. Jon Jones. Now, there is only one angle I can find for Alex Pereira winning that fight, and that's because in the brief minute that we saw Jon Jones on the feet against Ciryl Gane, he looked a bit weird, a bit awkward. But in the end, that didn't really matter because he did just get immediately submitted in the first round. And that's exactly how I see the Pereira versus Jones fight going. And I don't see it going any other way. Now, there is only one fighter who I have absolute full 100% confidence in to beat Alex Pereira, and that is the real champion, Tom Aspinall. Tom Aspinall is basically Jones, but with more explosivity, more athleticism, and more danger on the feet. The speed of which Aspinall gets his submissions as soon as he takes the fight to the ground is very scary to watch, especially if you're someone like Alex Pereira, who's one, not a heavyweight, and also a kickboxer who's only been doing MMA for a few years. And I also believe that Aspinall's that good on the feet to the point where he could just beat Pereira without even taking him down. So that's why he's in the will win tier. So that's my tier list. If you disagree, leave a comment because it drives engagement and gives me more views. Goodbye.